Hey TCS TV viewers, it's Dave from the camera store. Today I'm going to walk you through how to get some great landscape photos. Landscape photography can be very rewarding and a lot of fun. Often the toughest part though is just getting out of the house to take pictures. Today I'm going to walk you through some simple steps on how to get some amazing photographs. Step 1 is choosing the right camera gear. What I'm going to talk about today will apply to pretty much every camera system out there. Today I opted to go with the very powerful Fuji GFX100. This is a medium format sensor, and that means it's 70% bigger than a full frame sensor. Now I love the aesthetic that size of sensor provides. Now we also get huge resolution at 100 megapixels, great dynamic range, making this the perfect camera for landscape photography. That being said, this is a very expensive camera system and not a lot of people are going to be able to afford or justify this camera. You can achieve some really excellent results with smaller sensors. Step 2 is choosing the right lens for our shoot. Now typically when we think landscape, we think really wide angle. And that's true in certain cases. Today I brought along a couple lenses. One is a 32-64 zoom lens and the 32 is a 25mm equivalent on a full frame body. And it's great for those wide angle shots. The other is the opposite side. It's a 250mm lens from Fuji. That's a 200mm equivalent when it comes to full frame and it allows me to do some nice compression and a completely different perspective on how I shoot. And if you're brand new to photography and you just bought your first camera with its basic kit lens, I encourage you to experiment with it. Try some shots with the wide angle and then play around on the telephoto and see what kind of different looks that you get. We've talked cameras and we've talked lenses. We need to talk about some of the accessories that we're going to use for landscape photography. One of the most crucial ones is a tripod, a decent bag to carry everything in, and a filter selection. Today I'm using the Leofoto LS324C tripod with the LH40 ball head. This is a really rugged, strong combination that's going to support my camera system today. It's made out of carbon fiber, so it's lightweight. We also have the twist locks, which I like because they're very easy to deploy. Today for a backpack, I'm deciding to use the Schmidt Explorer 40. It's a 40-liter backpack that sufficiently holds all the gear that I brought today, and I brought a lot of gear today. What I do like about it, it's very comfortable. It's one of the few bags I've seen out there that you can actually adjust the height of the straps on the back. So that helps you really adjust if you have a very short torso or a long torso. You can customize this to your fit really nicely. It also features a very unique modular design. And it's a very lightweight backpack that I'm finding extremely comfortable to wear today. The last thing that I brought on our adventure today is a filter system. Now there's 3 filters that I use regularly when I'm shooting landscape. The first one is a circular polarizer. Now just like a pair of polarized sunglasses, this cuts through haze and cuts through glare, especially on water and reflective surfaces. The second one I brought is an ND filter. It basically cuts out the light coming into the sensor through the lens, allows me to shoot much longer shutter speeds, and if I want those silky smooth waterfalls, it's a really powerful filter to work with. The last filter I brought is a graduated ND filter. So it's very similar to that, although it helps equalize exposures. For instance, if I have a very bright sky but a dark foreground, I can equalize the exposure across the entire frame. Depending on what I'm going to be shooting today, I might use one filter or all 3 at the same time. Step 3 is composition. Once you've come across an item or a subject that you want to photograph, it's to figure out how to make it really attractive through the viewfinder. Now typically with me, I'm always looking for leading lines. I'm looking for color, contrast, something that really catches my eye. And how do I best achieve that? There are some general rules when it comes to photography. One of them is the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is one of the most common rules you're going to hear when it comes to composition. Now it's very basic. Imagine, if you will, you take your frame and you cut it into 9 equal parts and you put your subject of interest off to the side and either to the top or the bottom of one of those thirds. It allows for a much more dynamic looking shot and a little more interest with some leading lines. Now of course rules are meant to be broken. The rule of thirds is not a hard and fast rule that you have to abide by when you're shooting landscape. Experiment and try some things. Photography should be a lot of fun. Now a piece of advice I heard years ago from somebody was that you are responsible for everything in the frame. And if you think about that and you look at that, take a look at your picture and see, where does my eye look to? Where does it dart around to? Is there a clear focus of what the subject matter is, or is it a bit scattered? We have this great waterfall behind me here, and something I've learned to do is explore the scene with the camera first before I break out my tripod and get ready for the shot. This way I can explore the angle that's going to be best for that, and I'm more prepared. Step 4 are your camera settings. We have 3 major settings to concern ourselves with. We have shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, and these are going to control the look of our image. We want to try and get the best quality of image, so I'm going to keep my ISO down as low as I possibly can. This camera, it's ISO 100. Now, do I want to freeze the motion of this waterfall, or do I want a little bit of motion blur for a little more dramatic effect? That's something I need to decide upon myself. Currently, I'm set up at f4, is the widest aperture of this lens, and a 60th of a second, which is going to do a nice job of freezing the action. But it's going to look a little amateurish. It's not going to look very spectacular at all. If I can slow my shutter speed down, I'm going to get a much nicer effect. Now with the current lighting, I can step it down to f22 on this lens and get 1/4 of a second shutter speed, which is going to give you a bit of a nice blur. Now if I really want to step up this shot, I'm going to put on my filters. For this next shot, we're going to change things up a little bit. I've applied a 10-stop ND filter and a circular polarizer to the end of the lens. Now the polarizer is going to help with some of the glare in the water, but the ND filter is really what's going to make more change. It's going to allow a significantly lower shutter speed for the exact same scene. I'm still shooting at ISO 100, but now I'm at 30 seconds at f4. Check out this shot. It has a much more dreamy, surreal kind of feel to it than that 60th of a second shot. A couple things that are important when I'm shooting a situation like this. One is I do not want to touch the camera before the exposure and use the camera's built-in shutter button. I want to use a 2-second self-timer or a remote shutter cable. This allows me to keep my hands off the camera and not put any vibration into it, ruining my shot. The other thing is white balance. I'm shooting in auto white balance, but I am shooting in RAW, so I have the most post-production flexibility when I'm working with it. The other thing I like to make sure of is to use the camera's built-in level to make sure my shot is level. The last thing I need is the shot to be a little bit skewed. It really kind of ruins a shot when something's just not quite right. Aperture is another very big factor when it comes to exposing your pictures properly, but it also has the effect of where your focus is going to be. We call it depth of field. The shallower the depth of field we want, the more your eye is going to be drawn to what's in focus. If you look at these examples here, this was shot at ISO 100 with 1/80th of a second at f4. You can see how just the tip of that driftwood is in focus. The rest is blurred out. So when you look at that image, you're constantly looking at what's in focus. Here's the exact same frame shot at much different exposure. Here I've dropped it way down to f32 at 1/3 of a second, and now you can see the entire driftwood is in focus and a little bit more distracting. I had a great time shooting today, and I hope you enjoyed some of the tips that I had along the way and can apply it to your own landscape photography and see if you get some really nice results. Now keep in mind, you don't need the fanciest, biggest, baddest camera on the planet. These settings and these tips that I was talking about apply to most cameras. So take advantage of that. Go out and explore the settings, work with this, see what works for you and what look that you have. It takes a bit of time and practice, but you develop your own sort of style, your own sort of character. And that's really nice when you kind of get to that level. It really sort of pushes you as a photographer. Now, I want to know if you have any tips or tricks for me. Leave it down in the comments down below. Make sure you follow us on Instagram. Please subscribe, hit that notification bell. We'll catch you again next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to check out our latest review, click up here. And if you're Canadian and want to shop local, click down here.